So are we ready to roll? Oh, did I hear an echo? Okay. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Township of Georgian Bay, Wednesday, September 10th, 2025, for our Committee of the Whole meeting. And I'd like to call this meeting to order at 9:02, and I will immediately confess to all, it's my fault that we're 2 minutes late, not technology this time. In the spirit of reconciliation, we wish to acknowledge the enduring relationship between Indigenous peoples and the territories they have traditionally occupied. We recognize and deeply appreciate the historic connection they have to this place, the land, the water, the sky, and those special places that allow echoes to happen, and all that live on, in, and above it. Oh, somebody's paying attention. We are grateful for the opportunity to meet here, and we thank all the generations of Indigenous peoples who have taken care of this place and who continue to care for it, and we want to show our respect. Hundreds of years after the first treaties were signed, they remain relevant today. May they guide our decisions and our actions. We commit to learn, to educate, to honor sacred places, and to take action towards real truth and reconciliation. Miigwech. All right, this is a special Committee of the Whole meeting, and I'm going to first ask my fellow councillors if there's any conflict of interest or pecuniary interest. I'm going to confirm with our clerk that there's no open forum. And then we're going to go into new business, process improvements. Councillor Cooper, this is a continuation of a project you initiated a while back. I will let you make the initial introduction, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I'm just also a little bit behind the 8 ball here in terms of getting my agenda up, but I think the first item that we agreed to discuss today was related to using and accessing some of the talent that's available to us in our township. Isn't that? I haven't got the list in front of me, but I think that's what it was.
Access to information.
Access to information.
Transparency.
And so I just, you know, I don't really need to give a long harangue about this, but basically I'm of the belief that we have people available to us in our township that can give us some pretty good advice. You know, I've heard arguments that let's say it's a lawyer that or a very senior planner that's in our midst and ratepayers, that they might be biased. Well, I'm sure they're biased. There's no question in my mind. They're biased in terms of looking after the environment at the Township of Georgian Bay. I don't think they're coming at this in an unprofessional way when we ask them questions, or personally biased. I think they're coming at it from the perspective of you know, taking care of the place. So I think that's worthy of note. And I put this in only to say that that talent is available to us, and I'm encouraging us as a council and our staff to take advantage of that wherever and wherever possible. And the other benefit I should mention is that individuals that have offered their assistance, and I could name probably 5 or 6 lawyers that we could draw on at least, and probably the same number of planners. I think they have been very generous with their time and their thoughts on certain issues. And the real beauty is that they're from the area, so they understand the place. They do really clearly understand what Georgian Bay is all about. And maybe some areas better than others because that's where they're located in terms of their residents, but I'm encouraging us to take advantage of that. And I realize that, well, I'm not too sure the reason why we won't, but I'm throwing this out as a suggestion.
Which particular item are you addressing?
He's drifted to number 11, 10, so why don't we start?
This is number, okay,
Number 11.
because because it sounded to me an awful lot like item 3, which was identification, selection of consultants and experts, and that's why I just wanted to double check what we're speaking. So we're talking about inviting participation and obtaining other perspectives, item 11?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, it was, I think we have 11, 12, and 13, 11 and 12.
10, 11, and 12.
Oh, I jumped.
We skipped 10, but we can go back.
We have 5, 10. The items not addressed yet are 5, 10, 11, and 12.
5, 10,
And
11, and 12. Oh,
But-
well, I'm,
We've started with 11 now, so let's do 11.
let's do, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, that's
I
fine.
didn't have my
No,
agenda up.
well, that's fair. We were too busy talking roads and things like that before this
Of
meeting
course we
started.
are. We
but,
the famous
okay.
bump on Georgian Bay Road.
Yes.
So there we go.
Um,
Anyway, that was what I was trying
Okay.
to bring forward, and I would just welcome participation and thoughts from others. That's all.
All right. Yes, in this inviting participation, obtaining other perspectives, you mentioned in particular working groups, submissions, and one-on-one conversations as 3 ways that we could get more information from the expertise that's amongst our residents in our township.
Yeah, and I could, Mr. Mayor, if I could just say that as an example, we had a group, a working group we pulled together a couple of years ago, or a year ago, I guess it was, to advise on community plans. And brought in people with some real expertise, having created community plans in some cases, others that others who were lawyers that have a pretty good understanding of sort of planning, but also of how well community plans.
It was a well-qualified advisory group.
Right. So there's an example of where we have that information available to us. I'm not sure it's been used, to be quite frank. It's a bit sad, but oh dear. Anyway, got a neck again.
My sound's off. Oh.
Thank you, Brian, very much. Anyway, so
He just wanted to reinforce your point.
yeah, he was doing a lovely job. But anyway, so that was an example of where we can call upon others in our midst, and I think there are others. We had a planning council with some very well qualified individuals, and unfortunately is no longer in place. But we have some advisories on that front, thankfully. And so there we go. That's what I'm encouraging, and maybe doing a little bit more listening when you've got that talent available to you. We can talk about water quality. Look at what we had for many years with Dr. Pat Chow Fraser. There's another expert, and that was mostly voluntary work. It was well, not voluntary in the sense that we weren't paying for all that testing. It was basically McMaster. So another fine example of using the talent available to us. That's the purpose of this discussion. Thank you.
And I've made the comment before, and I'm going to repeat it now. Some things are worth repeating, is that we are blessed in this township with a lot of people, both on the bay and on our inland lakes, who are very interested in working towards protecting our environment, for instance, as one example, or providing community services of one form or another, be they events or charitable raising activities. And I think that we have to we'd be wise to understand how fortunate we are that not only capability but interest in serving the community or certain elements of the community is out there. And I agree with you fully that we should encourage people to participate, to provide input, provide feedback. And I also would like to point out that on some of the files that we have reviewed as a council, or a planning council, what have you, it's been very impressive, the input we've received, both not only the quantity, but I've been impressed often with the quality. Like some of the letters that people have written in have been very informative and have introduced a different perspective or an element that frankly I hadn't thought of until somebody brought it up. So I fully agree that there's a lot of capability out there. And I really appreciate when they do provide input. Councillor Bocek.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Listening to this conversation, I find some flaws in it. And the first one being the statement that they are from here. As far as a lot of people go, they're not from here. They're visitors or they're cottagers. They're not from here. That's the one thing I heard. B, do they have their practices in the township of Georgian Bay? I don't think so. They're probably in Toronto or somewhere else where they practice their profession. And I do believe that their input is valuable. But I don't believe that the township should be reaching out to them via an RFP or anything else to solicit their actions, being that they would be biased. And you said biased towards what? The environment and everything else. That's their opinion and some cottagers' opinion of what the environment is. So I'm not sure that we should be using these people on a paid basis, but more having their input and really go after them to offer their input on any particular topic. I think it's up to our staff to determine the best planner, the best legal advice for individual situations. And I don't think the system is broken. I think it works well just as it is. And I'm certainly open to any rebuttal on that.
I wanted to make a couple of comments if I could. I don't want to call it rebuttal, but one is this particular topic isn't, item 11 is not talking about hiring people. That was item 3 or whatever earlier. This is about inviting participation, so call it voluntary participation.
To answer to your statement, I think we have that presently.
Yes, but so we haven't come up with a final, we'll call it motion or resolution on this item, but to me, what we're talking about is encouraging people voluntarily to provide input.
Thank you.
The other thing, though, your comment about most of our residents are not from here, I take offense to that. And I take offense to that because you're basically telling me I'm not from here because I also have an address outside of the township. Well, that's what it sounded like. So
nor am I from here, but what I was suggesting that there is many families that are from here.
yes,
And there's many families on our staff that are from here,
yes,
historically from here.
yes.
So I was just taking a bit of offense to the statement that they are from here. They're not from here. They cottage here or they're visitors here. They're not from here.
Well, they may not, they may or may not have multi-generational history here. Some of our seasonal residents have multi-generational history, but I absolutely agree with you that what I will call the local input, or the people who lived here for many generations is at least as important as the seasonal residents. But I think the seasonal residents are also from here and that they are as attached to the area as I'll call it the local resident. And I would hope that in most of our discussions, we have both perspectives involved. And I think that's extremely important.
Thank you.
Your comment about, and they don't, some of these professionals that have seasonal residents here don't practice here. Well, actually, many of our local residents don't practice here because their jobs are in Midland or they're in Barrie or they're, so, yeah. No. No.
You're welcome to comment too.
This is seeking comments from and not accepting comments, which we do already. We welcome their opinion through letters and commenting here in the council's chambers when they have the opportunity. But I don't think it should go any further than that. I don't think we should be soliciting these professionals within our township. But if they wish to participate, that's a different thing.
I guess it depends on how you talk about solicit. I will say to all our residents, I welcome your input. I ask for your input. If that's soliciting, then fine, but absolutely want our residents to input in what's in front of us. I mean, to me, the number one function that we should have as a council is to listen. I think that's number one, listen. And listen to all perspectives, and appreciate that some people are bringing different perspectives, are bringing different backgrounds and different expertise to their perspectives, and I appreciate that. Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you to you, Mayor. My only point, and that's adding on to what the discussion is already ongoing here with regards to local talent. And my question is to Councillor Cooper, is this something we're trying to work on making arrangements for staff to reach out to those professionals, or are we conversely, as the mayor suggested, encouraging those professionals to offer their input as required to specific issues? Because the push-pull of all this is, I think, essential to figuring out whether or how we're going to do it.
I think what I'm trying to recommend here is that we draw on any talent that's available to us, both councillors and staff. And there is talent available in our township, and let's use it.
Well, I agree wholeheartedly in that, but if we're going to use it, I guess the issue in my mind is how do we utilize that talent? I mean, people like, there's a planner, Beth Halpenny and Cognition, who's been very, very good at calling me when she has wants to discuss specific issues and add her talent. And I'm always encouraging her to, forward it to the planning department if it's required. And she's very good about doing that. I'm not sure others would be as forthright, I guess, in offering their services unless we approach them. And I don't know that us approaching them, I'm thinking from a staff standpoint, is really a good idea. I have no problem myself approaching them. I think that's where it's got to come from. It's got to come from council members reaching out to the community to make sure that people that know the stuff that we're talking about put in their input.
Just to clarify, I think what I'm really saying is that I put it in the same sort of light as if you're in a senior role in business. Sometimes you pick up the phone and ask people a question, and they're willing to give you some thoughts and advice. And we have people in our community that are willing to give us some thoughts and advice, and we're not hiring them per se. That they will offer it up, usually pro bono, or almost always pro bono. So I don't think we're talking about hiring them. I think what I'm talking about is suggesting that we consider the value that they can bring to the table, including the fact that they are residents here. They're not visitors. Visitors are people that go and stay at a motel or a hotel. It's a very different issue. As a fourth generation Georgian Bayer with 6 generations in my family, I'm sorry, but this is my home. And I take huge offense to the word visitor. Thank you.
Director Whitlam, was your finger itching there or not? I wasn't sure. Or you were just adjusting things?
I was just adjusting things, but I'm happy to answer any questions should they come up.
Councillor Bocek, I'll let you respond, and then we're going to go on to Councillor Hazelton, please.
I'm sorry, if Councillor Hazelton's first, he can go.
Okay.
I just wanted to respond to that in a very short manner. My whole reason for this is I really want the professional's opinion at council. But if our staff is reaching out to them for their opinion, that's basically, if you phone up a law firm in Toronto and say, we need your opinion on this, they say, yeah, more than glad to give it to you, but it's going to cost you money because we reached out to them. If they offer to us their opinion, that's different. That's pro bono. But I believe if a planner or staff member reaches out to a law firm, they're expecting to be paid. The law firm itself, maybe not the individual who's going to offer their opinion. So I'm just very afraid that this will evolve and end up being a fact where we're going to have to start paying for their opinion when we have our own professionals that our staff and departments use already to represent the township in matters. And opinions don't represent the township. They're just opinions. Thank you.
Okay. Is your hand raised, Director Whitley?
This time it is, correct. So perhaps I can assist. As council knows, the former Planning Advisory Committee is not a committee of council anymore. There was direction last year from council for the Director of Planning to take the lead on a planning working group. So my intent with that is to very much utilize that expertise that's within the community and for a very focused and important project in the township, and that's going to be the official plan and zoning bylaw review. So I've received a number of suggestions since that time from various members of council on qualified individuals that might form part of that planning working group and help advise that OP review. I continue to welcome those suggestions of names and persons to whom I would reach out and invite them to become part of that, to assist staff and the ultimate consultant in preparing the official plan to ensure that those local perspectives and knowledge are incorporated into that process in a very formal way.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelton.
I'm going to keep beating this dead horse here. Not from here. My family started in the Georgian Bay area in the 1880s. First launched a floating accommodation, 57 feet long, 27 feet wide, in 1898. First bought a property in 1920. And the family continues today. I find it very difficult to believe how anybody could say we are not from here. So I'll leave that out there. What I really wanted to get to here is Georgian Bay Township generally operates with our community in a react mode. When I say that, I mean we publish agendas 5 business days before an event or a discussion, and our community are now in scramble mode trying to figure out how they might provide comment on these matters. What Councillor Cooper is suggesting here is that, as he's worded it, when they are about to produce a report or a study, they should publish the topics under review to council and the community well in advance of producing the report of the study, welcoming participation and input from both councillors and constituents. That's proactive, not reactive. Giving people a lot more time to consider a topic and then offer their opinions. I think that we need to understand that we are currently in a reactive mode and that we need to find some path forward of proactive. I was delighted to hear what Director Whitley just said a minute ago. The knowledge that we are going to be engaging in a OP review and zoning bylaw review, and that he would then begin reaching out to people in the community to assist in receiving their input. I think that's excellent. We don't do that, generally speaking, as a township. So I think this is something we need to consider as a change to how we operate. But I want to also offer that I think we need to define a process to structure how we go about receiving and acknowledging this information. I can offer through anecdotal evidence with no names that there are several members in my community who have in the past offered opinions, and they are experts, and they are now at a point where they feel ignored and disrespected, and they are now no longer prepared to offer their opinions. Now, I don't think it's a problem with staff at the township. I think it's a problem with process. I think that if we look at what Director Whitlib offered a minute ago, that is informing in advance of need. And that's what we need to do. But we also need to acknowledge receipt of comments that have come in and help the contributor understand where those comments are going to be used, how they're going to be used, or if they're not going to be used, what the ultimate outcome is. And so that there's a closed loop here. You have information coming in, you have consideration or non-consideration of the information, and then you have a cycle back loop at the end where you're informing after the Georgian Bay Township producing of a report to the people who have provided submissions. And I would say that this is a process that we are currently weak at and that we need to focus on because what we want is, and we've already heard from Councillor Cooper and the mayor, that we are blessed in this township with all kinds of experts who know, understand, and love and respect this geography and this community. And we want to find a way to be respectful in not only the asking for their input, the considering of their input, but also the reporting back afterwards so that they feel respected in this process and that they are then encouraged to continue to offer their opinions. So I'll leave that out there as a comment.
Yeah, I see Director Whitlib's mic's on, but maybe that's a leftover. Councillor Bochek.
I appreciate everything that's been said here today because some of what's being said here today is swaying what I walked into this room thinking. But at the same time, we had a planning committee that was disbanded, and that planning committee was to invite these professionals in to sit on that committee in a public forum and offer their information. Now that seems to have been brought behind the scenes. And I was one of the councillors that thought it would be a good idea to disband that planning committee because I thought it was very biased and it didn't represent everybody in the township. And I'm just worried, and from the very time of reading this, I was worried that we're heading in that direction, but even worse because we're not having it as a public process. This is a more of behind the scenes, working with our planning department, as opposed to being out in the open on YouTube or whatever it's put on these days through a planning committee, which should have been an equal split. So again, I appreciate everything that was said here today. It certainly informed me on the opinions of the councillors at the table. And I'm very capable of making my own decision based on what I heard today.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we have to do, and that is one of the responsibilities of staff, is to try to get I'll call it balanced perspective, a fully informed. The hope is when staff comes to us with a report that it is well informed, it's balancing, call it left versus right, or up versus down, or whatever the range is, so that we as a council can understand the pros and the cons of whatever the recommendation may be, or whatever the policy change may be. And I think that is very important. And that's one of the reasons why I often have appreciated the input that we've received from our residents, because different residents have different backgrounds, different experiences. Some have been in the township for generations, and some are relatively new arrivals. The new arrivals often have a different perspective than somebody who's been here for generations, just because they're looking at things with fresh eyes, for instance, and that's always valuable. And I think that that is whatever we do, that's one of the things I think has to be our goal. What we're trying to achieve is to make sure that we, I mean, and I think, like Councillor Hazelton is making a valid point, that if the people who are providing the input don't feel that they've been heard or been appreciated, then they may not provide the input again in the future. But I think we also have to distinguish between saying thank you very much to your input, even if we don't, we have to, we appreciate your input, but we may not fully agree with it, or we may want to balance it with other input or what have you. Brian might think that, he should have his road in front cleared and cleaned every week. And somebody on the water might think, no, he should never have it cleaned because I don't have a road. Both are valid points of view. And then I'm going to trust our director of operations to do something reasonable in the middle and say, well, yeah, we are going to service Councillor Bochek's road, but we're going to be doing it twice a year, just like every other road. It's a silly example, but you know what I mean. That's where we need the different perspectives, the different ways of looking at things. Yeah. Once the chair recognizes you, of course.
Okay. I think that's a very valid point, because I receive emails constantly from water-based communities, water-based residents saying, you're taking away the only thing we get from our taxes, which is garbage bins. We don't get anything else. They forget about the fire department, the ambulance, everything else that this township has to offer them for their taxes. And they say the only thing they get for their taxes is their bin collection. I could give you 20 emails in regards to that. That's an opinion that comes from a certain demographic. And if we have that opinion coming to our planning council without a balance, which you're saying, I think it's detrimental to this township, because a lot of people don't understand what the township does offer them. They only have their opinion of what the township offers them. So I don't disagree with this whatsoever. And when it comes to the resolution on this, I'll probably vote in favor of it, because I believe the points that were made here today are very good points, and it's changed my perspective of what I came in here thinking. But I just want to balance, and I want to make sure it's a public process. Everybody knows what's going on, and everybody has an opportunity to form their opinion and give their opinion. Thank you.
I mean, the other comment I wanted to make was in response to Councillor Hazelton's proactive approach. And I think that there's a lot of importance to that approach. But I think we also have to recognize that many of the topics that come in front of council or committee or what have you are not the scale of project that we want to say that, the official plan is something that's been in the works, the review of the official plan for years. And we don't have to remind Director Whitliff how keen many of us are on getting that process going forward. But that's a whole different scale than an individual coming forward with a planning application for their particular property. What I like about the plan, what we're doing now, is we're having a public meeting. And yes, the immediate neighbors know about it because they get a 30-day notice or whatever. Others don't know about it. But what's important there, we're having a public meeting where we're not making a decision. We're collecting data. And so people who want to provide input, even if they don't have it prepared in time for the public meeting, can still provide input to staff, because the staff won't be coming back for another month or two, depending upon circumstances, with a recommendation. And so to me, we're giving the public, we're giving residents, the neighbors, whomever, opportunity to provide input before we're making a decision, before staff makes a recommendation, which of course comes before council makes a decision. So I think that we have to, I love the proactive approach, but I think we have to scale it depending upon the nature of the topic at hand. Otherwise, what we'll end up doing is saying, on October, we're going to publish the items that are going to be in front of us in November and December, which means that then they won't get decided until January or February. And some topics, we don't really want to have 4 or 5 months worth of patience. And other topics, we absolutely should. So I think that's, to me, the proactiveness has to be scaled, if I can put it that way. Councilor Cooper, and then I'm going to go to Director Ing.
Thank you, Mayor. And just building on a couple of points that you've raised, which were excellent. I do recall that the process that you're referring to just now, with respect to input from the public and some lead time related to having one meeting where there's sort of public input, and then finally we come back with a recommendation, I think was encouraged by council, that process. So it's a good thing that we do have these discussions and do ask to have some changes in process. And that's why we're, I think, today sitting down with process improvement as a discussion. So I think you raised something that was a good example of where there was process improvement in communication. But I'd also like to say that I think it's important to acknowledge and appreciate the input we get from people on working groups and committees, et cetera, and make sure we do pay a fair bit of attention to that sort of appreciation aspect of it, because I think a lot of it is pro bono, and these are individuals that are probably, if their law firm or their planning company was billing, it would be $500, $600, $700, $800 an hour. And we're not getting billed for that. It's an interest that's there. So the other point you made, though, was around a balanced approach in terms of making sure we hear everybody, and I think we should, and I think that's very critical to have a balanced approach. I will say, though, there's one sort of place where there can be some bias, and that's where, if I'm on a committee and my primary goal in life is earning money as a contractor or a real estate agent or something like that, if I'm sitting on a committee, I probably have a conflict, and thus I have a bias. So I think when we are drawing information from our communities, we need to be careful about what the motivation is and understand what the motivation is. There's not I don't see the bias if somebody's offering up some opinions around planning or planning law, but there's no money going into their jeans. That's more, hopefully more objective, not biased. But to be on a committee where it's all related to the business you're in is a different matter, and we need to keep that in mind. So those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Engel.
I just wanted to point out that we as staff are constantly seeking out opinions. I have a number of lawyers that I work with on committees, professional engineers that are in specific areas. I have my neighbors, I have the counselors. So in our roles, we are always seeking out opinions of other areas. And then through our training experience designation, we are balancing that. And if we feel we need further, we may go for a legal opinion. But I very much differentiate between a legal opinion and the opinion I get from a lawyer. Because when I reach out to those lawyers that I know and I'm asking for an opinion, they are off the cuff. This is what I've dealt with before. They are not doing the research. When I am getting a legal opinion, I am paying them to do the research. And same with an engineer, do a research, find the precedent, give me the comparison, and then give me the justification for that opinion. So I think we need to bear that in mind, that there is a difference between getting an opinion from a lawyer and getting a legal opinion that we are paying for. Same with engineering and same with all other professionals.
Are you telling me you didn't respect my opinion on road engineering this morning, given my lack of qualifications?
I absolutely did, but I will weigh it
That's a
with
good
all
answer.
of the other opinions I get, and if needed, I will hire a professional engineer.
Councillor Bocheck.
I believe that councillors have an obligation to their constituents to bring to the council their concerns. I'll give you a typical example if I could. We had a gun discharge meeting at the Baxter Ward Community Center. 150 residents showed up. 149 were against and spoke against and supported not going forward with the gun discharge bylaw. One person stood up and gave their reason why we should move forward with this. Now, that opinion I use to make an informed decision at council on the way I'm going to vote. And I believe that that's an opinion, and it was presented to the councillor, and it's the councillor's responsibility to bring that opinion and offer it to staff and to the rest of council so it can be voted on. I'm a firm believer that the voice of the residents should come from the councillor. And if I seek an opinion from a professional, then I can bring that to council and let everybody know what that opinion was, because maybe it's better than my opinion. But I shouldn't use the word solicit, but to go out and get a legal opinion direct to staff instead of to the councillor, who can then bring it into the council meeting. I certainly will do that. I was the only councillor, I believe, that showed up at the discharge meeting at Baxter Ward Community, and we had professionals there. Oh, you were on Zoom? Okay. So we had professionals there that spoke to the matter, and they spoke to the council, and they spoke to me in specific, and I will represent their opinion here in the council's chambers. And I think that's a good way to have the process carried out. Again, my opinion.
Councillor Hazelton.
Councillor Cooper and I had a good chat with Director Whitliv yesterday. We were talking about how to gather input from experts, and I think what Councillor Cooper and I were suggesting is where you have expertise in the way of lawyers that are municipal lawyers, planning lawyers, environmental lawyers. Historically, what I have observed here at the township, and I may be misinformed, but historically, my conclusion is if the township doesn't pay for it, we discharge it, we discard it. We might listen to it, but it's not generally the way we follow things. We, as a council and a township, chose to hire a new lawyer to deal with a matter recently, and that was Rod Northey. And the conclusion of everybody seemed to be that he had far more relatable expertise on the matter than the lawyer that we typically use. That's probably a true statement. Whether we want or not may be irrelevant, but the expertise was quite different from the lawyer that we typically use. So what and we see this over and over and over again in planning, in legal, in environmental. Different people have different expertise. I'd like to refresh everyone's understanding of what we'll call the moral matter, where we had a resident, Tom Bain, who brought in expertise from a new lawyer, Donnelly, who retained environmental experts, none of which our lawyer had the insight to understand who he should bring in or how to coach them. And that matter was won in a combination of teamwork between the township lawyer and the lawyer that and Donnelly, who was brought in by Tom Bain. So in that situation, a resident paid mega dollars to bring that extra expertise to the table. And unfortunately, the expertise that we had immediately available to us because of normal business operations we probably would have lost. So where I'm kind of going with and where Director Whitlib guided us was, his recommendation was, well, get your members of the community to put their opinions on their corporate letterhead so that when we get them, we have them as even higher levels of authority, if you will, or consideration. And I'm going to come back to the need for a process, because if we don't have a process in place where we can inform somebody of an issue and where we can fully acknowledge and be respectful of the receipt of their information, we are not going to get these very expensive consultants to offer us pro bono work on matters that are of importance to our township. So I would like us to modify this resolution to add in the need for a process to inform in advance, acknowledge, and respectfully receive the information, and inform the contributors after that Georgian Bay decision. In other words, if they're going to be received and engaged in a loop of giving us information, I think it, as a minimum, we should directly respond back to them after we've created a report, and so that they can see what our final consideration of their material was. We don't have that process in place, but I think that would be a perfect addition to this resolution, so that we can establish a little bit more structure around this, because that structure is today missing. Thank you.
I just want to make one comment, and that is on our many of our planning applications that Ms. Way gets to read a little bit part of a speech following my little part of a speech, and in that it says that anybody who wishes to be informed of the outcome, or I forget the exact wording, even though I hear it every month, simply request that. And I think that, in other words, I think in some situations the process is available, in that if somebody's providing input and they wish to receive, be kept up to date with the file, that can be done. So I don't think in that sense what Councillor Hazelton's referring to is that much of a leap, in that we in some cases we're already doing a version of that. C.O. Mariotti.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Cutty. I think you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, we
Sorry.
we do have a feedback loop, and when a report is published, which is the result of various conversations, the report is out in the public for the public to review. It may be that some opinions offered do not find their way in their report. And it's possible because after cross-referencing with other opinions and investigations, et cetera, that maybe that opinion was not, let's say, of ultimate use to a report for the township. And so if we have members of the community who, by virtue of submitting their opinion, it should be captured and it should be ingrained in a township report, and it doesn't happen and they get upset, that's life. We have not only the individual opinions of these folks to take into account, but we also have to take into account the broader picture that sometimes these individuals that provide us the opinion don't see that. We also have to work within the confines of creating policy and procedure for the township as a whole. There are exceptions, the community plans, et cetera, but as a whole, we have to look at the policies that apply as consistently as possible across the township. And we know that even some bylaws to this day, they don't fit the 100% for every application. So there is you know, going back to what Councillor Hazelton was saying, that there are, and Councillor Cooper, you know, there are experts out there, yes, and so it depends how those experts wish staff to adopt those expert opinions. If you want staff to adopt those opinions as expert, then put it on letterhead, so that we can then use that for the sake of clarity, that this was actually an individual who provided their opinion in a formal manner. If it's just simply you know, through an email, hey, you know, I think this should be done like this because XYZ, then of course we'll always take those opinions into account. But at the end of the day, if someone doesn't like the outcome of after following their opinion, then
Yeah, no, I think, you know, it's a difficult balance. I mean, I'll use, for example, a planning application where we receive 15 letters from 15 different neighbors or interested residents or what have you. And, you know, it's not unusual for our clerk to list who those opinions came from, and maybe even separate them into the pros and the cons, you know, say 7 are in favor and 6 are against, or whatever it may be. But we don't publish those letters. I imagine they could be obtained through a freedom of information or something like that if somebody really wanted to see them. But they're listed, and when we list correspondence, we don't say, and so has a doctorate in philosophy, and so is a trained welder, or whatever the categories may be. And I think I like the comment, actually, or the suggestion that one of the discussions is that, you know, if you give us a letter or an opinion or what have you on your letterhead or per the format of a professional report, that's going to carry a little extra weight because you're basically putting your professional reputation on the line. But I don't want that to make it sound like we don't want to hear everybody else's opinion that don't have the same qualifications, and many people's qualifications are informal. That, you know, you may have studied accounting all your life, but as a hobby you were taking water samples for 47 years. Well, you know a fair bit about water sampling, you know, that like, so but I think, I mean, we're talking around here in the sense that there's always, we can always make improvements to our processes, but I think we all agree that we want folks to provide input. We appreciate when they are willing to share their expertise as well. We should say thank you for that input in one form or another. But I do think it's also important to understand that staff have a professional obligation to weigh all the input they've received, all the research they've done, and come up with what they believe is the best recommendation that may or may not, it may be 90% the same as expert X, or it may be 40% the same as expert X, all depending upon how they've weighed everything. And I think that's, you know, that's staff's job, is to weigh all that input and come up with what they think is the best recommendation for council to consider. Now, council may not agree. So we do get that now and then too. Councillor Cooper. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bocek, that's an old hand, isn't it?
No.
It's a new hand?
Yeah.
Okay, then Councillor Bocek first, then followed by Councillor. I apologize, Councillor Cooper. I thought it was an old.
My very first statement perhaps was mistaken about cottagers and visitors and that kind of stuff. We don't solicit or we don't encourage the Indigenous population here to give input. They are the real residents of this township. Before this was a township. And I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we engage in that. But I don't think we've reached out yet. I mean, I do, and that forms my opinion when I come to council. I think the mayor with his meetings with chiefs of nations perhaps gets their opinion, but I don't think that their opinion is really being taken into consideration because we're not getting it. And I don't know how we get it, but I think we should reach out to Wata Nation, reach out to Moose Deer Point, reach out to many people that have a stake in what they believe the responsibilities of the township are when it comes to environment and everything else. Getting a legal opinion from, and this goes back to what I said, getting a legal opinion from a law firm who has a resident here who is based in Toronto, I don't think is any more important than hearing the voice of some of our residents that have been here for 200 years. And perhaps I didn't articulate that properly, and it was taken in a manner that seemed to be very offensive. So I'm just trying to be clear.
I think that, I mean, as you pointed out, I absolutely want to hear the input of our neighboring nations. But I also, in response to you, is I think any local resident, Indigenous background or not, to me should be encouraged to provide input if they want to provide input, and if they feel they're being shut out, then please encourage them to come forward with suggestions, because as you say, it's hard to reach out to people because we have so many different ways of reaching out to people. The trouble is, because we have so many different ways of reaching out to people, we actually reach fewer, because it's not like we have that common newspaper anymore that everybody reads. And I find that, you know, I'm showing my age, with apologies to all, but with so many social media choices, I don't know how to reach people because, you know, I swear every few weeks a new vehicle surfaces one form or another, way ahead of me. And I haven't hired a social media expert to advise me. Maybe I should. But anyway, to me, Councillor Bocek, I strongly encourage you to strongly encourage anybody you talk to make suggestions of how we can better hear their voice. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor, and all some very good points, including social media. And I had a little discussion this morning with our Director of Operations about the points of entry of information that we have to deal with these days. How many places do you have to answer the phone? How many places do you have to answer your emails? Are you into texting? I have another name for that, but I won't mention here. But I just think there's so much media information and social media information, some of it which is very fallacious and nasty. So I choose not to participate in some of that, but I do agree with Councillor Bocek that we do need to reach out to the Indigenous community, and I'm very much in favor of that. In fact, if you think about some of the bigger projects that we've had in the last 5 years, I spent 3 years trying to reach out to the Indigenous community about the education center, and unfortunately could not elicit participation. So I think a lot of us do try very hard to include and encourage participation from the broad community. And so I just wanted to mention that. There's also, thankfully, I think maybe make some contact with respect to the current initiative with the GBA, the 2050 program. There's reaching out, we are reaching out to the Indigenous community. So far, nobody on our committee, which is unfortunate, but there are a lot of attempts, especially as it pertains to, you know, sort of broader 10,000 foot planning for Georgian Bay. There's definitely reaching out, at least from me, and I think others. I'd like to also talk about getting opinions on letterheads. The only point I'd make is with respect to expecting that from our consultants, not consultants, our pro bono experts. is that if, I think our mayor will know this, if you're an accountant with one of the big five accounting firms, the rest of the partners wouldn't be too happy if you're using letterhead and giving up a whole bunch of pro bono opinions. You'd have to actually get approval in many of these firms to do that kind of work and offer up your letterhead and put the firm at risk, whether it's an accountant or a lawyer or a planner. I think if we are getting opinions, it's some of the time it'd be rare that you get it on letterhead, but it'd be nice if we could. Just understand that I have had legal opinions pro bono on letterhead. It just so happened that the person giving the opinion was also the named senior partner of the firm, and that can happen. You can get lucky that way. But I just wanted to mention this is probably not going to happen, but it doesn't mean that the opinion is biased. Let's just pay attention to what is the content and get on with life. Anyway, thank you.
Yeah, and I can't help but make reference to what Director Engel said about, you know, getting off the cuff opinions from lawyers versus getting a researched response. It doesn't mean the off the cuff isn't worth getting. Otherwise, why would you bother? But it's a different level or type of response, but also well worth considering.
If I could just comment on that, because I have had a number of, and we have shared this with the staff, legal opinions, for example, that were fully researched, actually, where they went out and worked on the question. They just didn't put it on letterhead because of what the reason I just gave, but it was well researched. So you can see that if you get something from somebody in writing and they've provided a lot of backup, it's been researched. Thank you.
Director Whitlam.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to Councillor Cooper's point, I agree. Let's not get hung up on letterhead. And I appreciate that, you know, that brings in other considerations like the firm, the partners, etc. But from staff's perspective, you know, we sometimes get comments, even in, you know, an email, something as simple as an email, signed by Joe Smith or signed by Joe Smith PNG. It's not on letterhead, but that gives a different weight to the comment, because when they attach their credentials to that comment, then we know they're providing independent professional judgment pursuant to their responsibilities as a professional to whatever professional body they report to. So whether it's PNG or LLB or RPP that comes on that informal email or letter that need not be on corporate letterhead, that certainly helps us a lot in terms of the weight we can attach to those comments.
I had an interesting conversation a few days ago with an individual who was with a firm, and they were considering hiring a new employee, and weighing the differences between getting an employee who knew her stuff and getting an employee who had a professional designation. And it was an interesting discussion, because what the professional designation did, it didn't make the person necessarily better at their job, but it meant that they had an education that said this is what professionalism involves, and this is how you behave, or that's maybe not the right word, but it added weight to that individual's let me call it opinion and approach, fair or not. And so, but I think that's, you know, part of what we have to consider when, you know, and you can read it when you read the emails, whether or not they put their qualifications. You can just tell by the tone of some of that they're well crafted versus emotional. And I personally, I want both of them, because when you got the well crafted and you get the emotional. And if you'll excuse me for a moment, I remember when we were fighting to save the Honey Harbor School, and one of the reasons that I was so impressed is we had numerous people, and they were coming from different angles, and it made a far better package than if any one of us was just presenting what we had to say. And I think that's what we're looking for. I think, yeah, your hand was up next, Councilor Hazelton, please.
Thank you. I want to make two comments. The first comment is in context of what Director Engel offered, where she reaches out to her personal network to ask comments and questions and so on. And it kind of occurred to me that perhaps ultimately what we're really trying to do here is find a way to insert the community experts into that personal network. So that when you reach out for expertise, you may know some people, but most of those will not be community experts. They'll be experts from a previous life, from a previous geography or whatever. Maybe we need to start having a bunch of cocktail parties to introduce you to the experts that we know and respect in our communities, so that you have that open channel to be able to reach out and connect with them. But I think until we get there, a slightly different process for the bigger projects is probably appropriate. Second point is, I had the opportunity of filling in for Councillor Cooper at the whatever is that, Indigenous table. What was that? Yeah, it was around some sort of, what's that?
It was a memorable occasion, obviously.
Well, I don't remember the name of the table. The Indigenous table that it was in the Wata.
The Muskoka Area Indigenous Leadership
There you
Table.
go. Okay. Okay. Malt or whatever. Anyways, so what was really memorable for me is there was conversation by one of the chiefs, and his comment to me and to us was, you guys kind of don't get it. You're part of a government, a funded environment, and when somebody asks you a question, especially from a staff standpoint, you have funding to allow you to research and provide comment. But from the Indigenous community, they don't have money flowing in, and so we have this thing in our policies that there's often a duty to consult. And a duty to consult means you got to go and ask them, but they're not funded to give you the answer. And so they don't want to even talk to you about those things. And I think one of the things that we need to perhaps be aware of is, if we want the Indigenous community to provide input to us, we may need to find a path of structuring compensation so that we are covering their costs to then give us those opinions. And I don't know if that's exactly what the story is, but when this chief made that comment, it just kind of stuck in my head and said, okay, we've got a problem getting input from the Indigenous community. And we can't just go and ask them, because unless they're offering a personal favor, they're not structured with funds coming in to allow them to do that. So
No, that's been a long-standing challenge, because we put duty of consult, and I still remember Chief Williams from Rama saying, yeah, just last week I got a letter on my desk that they wanted our opinion on whether they should be adding in sidewalks to their village that was like 50 or 100 kilometers away. Why? I mean, I'm sorry, that's just, anyway, and no, they don't have the resources to write a nice letter saying, we think sidewalks are a wonderful idea. Like, anyway, I still remember that example. Thank goodness I don't remember what the community was. I don't remember the community that made the application, but okay. We've been on this for more than an hour. I think we have to try to wind up this topic. Councillor Bochek, I see your hand up. I don't know if you have a quick comment, and Ms. Schneier, but I like to wind this topic down. I think that actually Councillor Hazelton came up with a brilliant thing at the end. Introduce these experts to staff, let them have a chat. Then they get to know each other, and therefore the staff are more likely to say, hey, Mr. So-and-so, I heard that you have a lot of expert in trees. What do you think about this situation?
No, that's what I was
No,
about to
that's one
comment.
option.
How about an iced tea
Oh, yeah, okay.
for us that don't drink an iced tea?
I'm signing up.
Okay. Councillor Bochek?
Yeah, a last comment. I'm probably old school on all of this. I've been around for a little while, and you know, we had a get together where we brought in an expert, Mr. Tom Bain, who got a group of the community together, including 3 councillors. I think it was Councillor Douglas, myself, and Councillor Edwards, and educated us on septic systems. And it was a very good presentation. It was on Moore Point. There was probably 10 other people at that meeting. And with his information, the 3 councillors that took part in that were able to bring his professional information to the council's chambers, and we got a unanimous vote out of that. So that's kind of where I was coming from with my initial comments here about, and 2, through the cocktail parties, possibly, seeking information from an expert that a council member can bring and relay to the rest of council and to staff, as opposed to going directly to staff. That was a very useful tool for me to see an expert bring information to the public and to council in a non-formal way, and really helped out. Now, I don't know that the new plan or procedure that we're offering here is better or worse, but old school, I like the way the community and professionals would come to their councillor and their councillor would bring their point to this room. That's about it.
Thank you. Director Schneider.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to remind Council of a report that we did bring forward in February that did speak about the possibility of going to RFP for an elder in residence, which would be similar to what an integrity commissioner would offer in terms of advice for the municipality, and a for-hire situation when questions are asked of the Indigenous communities around our community. I wonder whether or not it's the will of council to bring that back and have a rediscussion if this is something that is a priority for council, or has a better understanding now of what exactly the Indigenous community faces when requests are made. And the second point is that often in the high 90s, most applications do require a duty to consult for Indigenous communities. And we have a pretty strong relationship with the First Nation communities that surround our community. However, they also are on varied timelines and will take our requests, but don't necessarily respond. And so long as they have we identified that we have showed a request, it often passes enough for the duty to consult. But I would like some direction, if it's possible, for us to bring back elder in residence, if this is the wish of council.
I don't really want to go down there right now because that's not on our current agenda, but I appreciate the reminder that we can consider that going forward, because and I find that just as, and I'll say this briefly and then we'll move on, but I find that our indigenous community, at least the First Nations near us, are quite willing to chat. Now, is that a duty to consult? In some cases, that's all it takes, because you say, well, no, that's fine. We don't. But sometimes we work on projects together. We've had some very successful mutual projects, and I think so. I think an open line of conversation, of communication, is very important. All right. There was a motion. Sorry, Director Whitlib, you want to throw in one more remark? No. Okay. There was a motion proposed for item 11. I'm a little bit concerned is that it starts with anyone in senior management is about to produce a report, they should publish the topics under review well in advance. Again, I'm worried about that because that's almost suggesting that is throwing in an automatic delay into reports, many of which do not require that level of I don't think would inspire that level of interest. However, what I do like about this is that that we encourage senior management to reach out, and that could be in the form of working groups, direct submissions, and direct one-on-one conversations. I mean, I have no problem with something like that. So I just wondered, do we want to do a streamlined version of this motion so it can move on, or do we want, or do we want to spend another hour fine tuning it? Councillor Hazelton.
It's, the resolution reads both council and communities. To sound like a broken record, I've asked many times about a schedule of likely months where reports or topics will come back for council consideration. Haven't been able to get one of those. But in some respects, that's really what this is all about. It's giving us and the community an indication of, well, we think we're going to have this topic coming back in, July, or this topic coming back in October. And if it slides to November, well, it's not a big deal. It's just notional, is just coming back at some point in time in the future. But without that kind of thing. So I'll give you an example. My counselor, who is not physically here with me today, is very, or electronically, is very focused on some matters that relate to compensation and some other things. And he has in the past brought unsolicited legal opinions for consideration, and being able to have an advance notice of, well, when is that topic going to come back to council, so I can reach out and then get that opinion and make it available in advance of council so we can consider it. That's one of the things that is, in my opinion, part of this item number 11. So should we be using the resolution as it simply reads right now? I don't want senior management team to produce a notification on every report or study that they do, but we have milestone studies that have come along that, and I won't name all of them, but we have topics like an official plan review, a zoning bylaw review, a water quality study, a waste study, and I think those kind of larger items where there is a target time, and to some degree we've had some advance notice on some of these things, but I think what this is getting at is trying to provide structure going forward so that we don't stumble across the fact that, oh my God, we have a fairly significant thing coming up next month and we've got 5 days notice because we don't have a schedule. So that's kind of where I'm going in my mind, is publishing topics under review. That helps both the council and the community. And it then gives the community and councillors the opportunity to reach out to the community to get expertise and bring it to the table. And so I think there's huge value in that. And I understand staff, excuse me, don't want to be pinned down to specific dates, but something notional that says we're going to see this in October and maybe it doesn't happen until November or December is way better than not knowing when in the future it might happen. So I'll pause there.
We have work plans from staff, and maybe, I mean, I don't want to give staff more and more, I'll call it busy work. They produce these work plans. Maybe staff could at some point say, the CEO Mariotti, who's waiting for me to shut up so he can make a comment, but maybe he could say, I'm starting to work on a with Director Engel on a snow plowing plan for this winter, so that it will come in front of council in a month or two. If anybody wants to provide input, please do. But we have to be a little bit careful, because otherwise, I mean, how many of our residents actually read, for that matter, councilors actually read the work plans that we have from senior staff?
Well, not only that, it's can we as councilors accurately extract from the work plan target timelines for addressing things?
Well, and to me, just asking staff to give us more and more and more and more scheduling and planning is asking them to do less and less and less of their actual work. That's my concern. C.O. Mariotti.
Thank you, Mayor Kutsia. Yeah, you mentioned the work plan. We also update the legal files listing on a monthly basis. We have our monthly staff update reports that we issue. There was a question that was raised in council. A member of council asked for an update on Leduc Lane. It was in the staff's monthly report. So, and if an individual councillor would like to have an update on a particular file, pick up the phone, send us an email, send us a text, and we can very easily respond to that individual councillor to let them know where we're at in the queue. To make another list, to me, is really counterproductive, partly because some of the information that we provide is not being absorbed. And as you say, Mayor, if we keep on making lists and lists and lists, we're not actually getting the work done.
Yeah, strictly personal opinion. I'd much rather have an executive summary than all of the data that's being given to us as it is. Councillor Cooper. Did you just say yes? You, Mr. Detail? Councillor Cooper.
Just in the interest of this particular resolution, though, and I do understand the desire to have a variety of different things added. I'm interested here in encouraging soliciting input from time to time. And if you read this resolution, and the second part of it says this input could, not should, must, says could be invited in the form of from these sources. So in other words, I think it already addresses the opportunity for staff to or to not have to do anything of the sort, depending on the importance of the matter or if there's any expertise out there in the first place. So I think we've sort of got it covered off, haven't we?
Well, so we could have it, be it resolved that senior management team welcome participation and input from both councillors and constituents in addition to doing their own research and this input could be invited in the form of working groups, direct submissions, and direct one-on-one conversations.
Fine.
Okay, moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Hazelton. Be it resolved that the senior management team welcome participation and input from both councillors and constituents. In addition to doing their own research, this input could be invited in the form of working groups, direct submissions, and direct one-on-one conversations. All those in favor? All right, that is carried. So we're just going to zap a couple. You got it. Good. I just did an edited version, and we're moving on. So, okay, let's go to 10 then. Access to information made available to council members. Background: each member of the council is charged with the responsibility of doing their own research beyond that which staff present to the whole council. And you want me to read the whole thing, or do we just go into discussion? Sorry?
I'm happy to lead it off, but.
Okay, Councillor Hazelton go, then Councillor Bocek, please.
Okay.
Hazelton, Bocek.
So I had a very interesting interaction with our fire chief yesterday. We were talking about a variety of things that are taking place in our community. And one statement he made to me is, well, I know things that I can't tell you. And that's fine. That's certainly the missing part of it was I can't tell you in public. And what the inference was, if I knew what he knew, I might think differently or vote differently on matters that council is considering. And what occurred to me was that was actually a good example, I think, of this particular topic, because there are things that he is purview to that I am not, but presumably in closed session I could be, and presumably in closed session, if council were to be made aware of these other factors on things that council is considering, council might make different decisions. And I think that's that's a good, I think it's a good example of what we're trying to get at here, is that there is information that is available often to staff that council needs to have access to be able to make fully informed decisions. And sometimes there's a challenge at getting that information. And sometimes we have members of the community that ask for information. They're told you have to go through an FOI process, and yet we had a wonderful example in coaching from Rick O'Connor when he was here 2 years ago, where he basically said, publish everything. Nothing is confidential. Publish everything. What is the risk to the township? It's got to be so small. Publish everything. Well, maybe you don't want to do that, but at least tell everybody in closed session what it is that is going on so that we can make fully informed decisions. And this isn't just matters that are currently on the table, but I think I heard that a matter is coming before council in a month or two. That is something that, as a councillor representing the community, I would want to know about. But again, privileged information. We need to find a way to get this information that will guide us as councillors on how to effectively make decisions to represent our community. We need to find a way to get that into our domain of knowledge. And I don't know what the best path is. It occurs to me that a closed session might help us, but I think we need to understand that that information does need to make it into the minds of councillors so that we can make better decisions.
Councilor Wojcik.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I was looking for more information on this item, mainly because my thoughts on it were, we usually receive a report from a department, and then it's about 30 days before that report comes back to council for a decision. Once I read the report and I get as much information as I can, a lot of times I got all the information that I needed. Sometimes the report doesn't give me all that information. So I have 30 days to seek that out through the proper channels, to the CAO, asking staff members to clarify or give me more information. And I think that 30-day period is ample for me to get what I need to make a decision at council. So I was unsure exactly what this meant, but after listening to Councillor Hazelton about hidden information that is not available to council members because of some reason, Privacy Act or whatever, it could be discussed in closed session. I'm not sure that's out of the realm of possibilities of things to look at. But in my own case, once a report comes, I usually get all the information I need to make a decision. And if I don't, I seek it. And most of the time I get it.
CEO Marriott.
Thank you, Mayor Council. There are some things of a sensitive nature that we discuss in closed. We discuss these matters in closed together with council as a whole. There is a fine detail here that there is a difference between council as a whole and an individual councillor. There are other matters which are bylaw related. You know, if there's an active investigation that we do not even discuss with council as a whole, because there is a risk of injuring that investigation. And what staff is planning on doing, because there have been several bylaw investigations where there's been involvement from individual councillors as well as council as a whole. So staff will bring forward some third parties to kind of have a refresher training, not only just for council but also for staff, in terms of the process of an active investigation and the risks, et cetera, associated with that. So I want to make that distinction clear that we can discuss certain items with council as a whole in closed and not with individual councillors.
Yeah, I think it's very, there's a few things here. One is I think it's very important to understand. I mean, I totally disagree with the suggestion that everything should be published. I'll go one example that maybe most would agree with me, but certain personnel matters should not be in the public record. And there may be an employee in our building that is going through a personal challenge of one form or another, or there may be a relationship between two employees that is trying to be resolved by a third party one way or another. Like it's easy to imagine personnel issues that frankly, I don't want to know about unless they involve me one way or another, because it's none of my business. And I think we have to accept that, and I use that as one example. I think some bylaw investigations are another example that we shouldn't know about it. It doesn't matter how curious we are about it or want to really know, or whether or not our neighbors say, do you know what's going on over there? And we can say, well, I see a stop work order posted on the building, but I don't know any of the details. I mean, like, I think we have to be respectful of the fact that some information is confidential, including information that we actually receive in closed and that is not to be shared. I'm also, concerned. One of the challenges we face, and this council does face it, and it's a hard one to balance, is the first sentence here is each member of council is charged with the responsibility of doing their own research. I'm not sure that's in the Municipal Act. And I can tell you that many topics that come in front of this council, I haven't done any independent research. And some topics, absolutely. I've done my internet searches. I've asked certain people because I want to get more perspective from the community or the experts or what have you on solid waste is a prime example. I spent too much time in my life looking up how different communities take care of their garbage and things that are different parts of the various provincial acts. Just because I want to be better educated because it's a topic of interest. But I think that, we have to be careful also, taking that one step further, when we say make allowances for individual members to obtain information directly from staff, we have to be careful not to cross a line. I mean, I think any one of us as individual councillors can go up to Director Whitlib and say, can you give me some what input can you give me on this particular bay and or what? And if it's basically publicly available information, or if he's sharing with us parts of the Planning Act or things like that, that's a perfectly fine conversation. But I don't know if we want him to go into, well, applicant X has come forward and they're thinking of building extra large cottage, and we're in discussions with them about whether or not they really need the 5th bathroom. Is that any of our business? Eventually, they'll resolve it into an application that comes in front of us, and and it has 3 bathrooms, and we don't have to know that once upon a time it had 5 in their initial ideas, because to me that's a private conversation, or that's between the staff member and the applicant. And I don't know if the applicant really wants us to know that it took them 7 gyrations before they actually settled on the application in front of us. So I think we have to be careful what we're asking for here, and respect privacy, respect the fact that there's lots of things that a staff member may know that they don't want to share. I wouldn't be surprised that our fire chief in his involvement with bylaw hears things about a certain individual in our community that he's learned through the file, but he doesn't want to share that with you. He doesn't want to tell you about his perception of, say, the mental health of a particular individual or a certain part of their history, because even though he's learned it, that's not our business. So I think we have to be very careful. Oh, sorry. Clerk Way.
I would just like to note that some of the suggestions in here don't align with MFIPA. MFIPA and the IPC outline very specific processes on how information can and should be released and what that appeal process is. So releasing all information and then leaving it upon the person whose information it is to appeal to the IPC after the fact or as part of that process, that does not align with the parameters within that piece of legislation, so that's not something we could move forward for. I'd also like to note the township has a lot of records that aren't necessarily tied to a commercial business developer or applicant, so I don't know if this is about specific types of information that council's seeking access for versus a blanket statement for all information that we do have. And again, speaking to some of that correspondence that we have with members of the public, that, you know, like we in the clerk's office, for example, get various inquiries as to shore road allowance applications, and sometimes they come forward and sometimes they don't come forward, and sometimes they contain personal information about that family's personal history or health or other matters going on that would not be released publicly. So to carte blanche say we're going to make every record available publicly is a very slippery slope, and I think it puts the municipality at serious risk of releasing personal and private information as opposed to releasing what is necessary for council to make decisions on matters coming before them. So if there is something specific, I mean, I'm always happy to have members of council reach out and ask to come view something, and again, viewing something is different than us releasing something depending on the circumstance. So there's a lot of regulations around this, so for us to just say we're going to put it in our procedural bylaw doesn't negate our other obligations.
Councilor Jervis?
Yeah, just as a follow-up to comments made by our clerk here through Mayor. Within this resolution, it says, be resolved that information protected under the Privacy Act be made available to any member of council upon their request, even if the information can only be viewed in municipal offices and not copied. Is that not part of our process already? I thought so.
Yes.
Thank you.
We had a sample of that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's printed on pink. I'd like to give an example that actually happened to me yesterday. Constituent called, and he was concerned about the fact that he owed property taxes, which included a penalty. Long story, but I'll make it as brief as possible. And this is a situation that happens to quite a few people. Mortgage company was paying property taxes, mortgage got paid off, so then the individual has to take over the property taxes, but that communication didn't get through for one reason or another. Well, I went over and I was chatting with Nicole, and Candace joined the conversation, and they knew who the individual was because I mentioned the name, and they looked up the file to confirm the story was correct. But they couldn't share with me the numbers. I wasn't allowed to look at the screen. I don't know if that person owes $5 or 5,000. I don't know. It's none of my flipping business. And you could say, well, that's information. I want to know whether Councillor Cooper's caught up in his taxes. It's not my business. But I can tell you that a couple of people here could look it up and find out. Okay, good. And they would know whether you're paying monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or whether they have to chase you or not. The history's there.
You won't continue that way.
Okay, well. So again, and that's to me where I think the attitude of we should be fully transparent. No, we shouldn't. I was very appreciative that the staff yesterday gave me general answers. And we talked about the fact that there's quite a few people over history who have run into this hiccup of payments were being made by the mortgage company, now they're not. Maybe because the mortgage got paid off. And I mean, Candace was giving me some history of experiences she had at her prior job with that, with numerous cases of that sort of thing. So we can talk in general terms, but they can't tell me that particular individual what the dollar amount was, what the penalties are, and all that stuff, even though the individual in the conversation told me what the penalties were in the dollar amount, but they weren't going to confirm. And I think that's perfectly fair. Then
The resolution starts off dealing with access to information for counselors. Personally, I like to broaden it to access to information, period. We have a website. It should be easy to post almost everything up on the website so that people don't have to ask for things. I wanted to share a little experience that we had recently where I had a resident reach out to the township and ask for the site plan for Macy Bay. And she was told that, well, you can't have it because it's got to be a freedom of information. And then she said, because she's a lawyer, she said, well, it was supposed to be registered on title, and it's not available in the land registry. Turns out there was a mistake made in the process, and it was never registered on title. And yet we still said that it was had to be a freedom of information. And then later it was determined that no, these things, site plans for commercial businesses, shouldn't be private information. They should be public information. And it was released, posted on the website, etc. I think the example there is probably helpful because although this resolution talks about perhaps some private-like information, some will tell you that a site plan is private information, and yet the process to get to a site plan is 100% public process. And once the site plan is created, all of a sudden, some will tell you that it's private now, which I find hard to believe. Rick O'Connor's coaching would be, no, just post it, give it out. Don't ever ask questions. Don't waste your time blocking it. Give it out. But perhaps even more simply, every site plan that we have, residential, commercial, or whatever, given that it went through a public process to get there, should probably be posted on the website and findable by anybody who is interested in it. So although some might argue, well, that's, MFIPA can't do this, can't do that, identifiable, blah, blah, blah. We went through a public process to get there. There is no privacy concerns anymore because all that information is in the public domain. It just is really, really hard to find it. So this resolution, in my mind, isn't, or this topic isn't just about information for counselors. It's about information, for example, what I just covered, whereby we have information as a township, and I really don't want our staff burdened with going through a process to review and then maybe copy and then send out. Like, just post everything on the website. And no, I'm not meaning personal information, and I'm not meaning tax information and things like that, but let's become more open and transparent across the board. And if we start doing that, then I think the process for counselors to get access to all the information they need is going to be much easier. Presumably, we have a little training session on how to navigate the website because finding anything out there right now is challenging.
I think we learned that we're getting a new website. Is it next month?
The implementation process starts in October.
Okay. So they are working on that. But what you're talking about is not what I'm reading under this point. You're talking about transparency of I'll call it public information, public records and things like that, and the availability of it. Whereas this, when I read this, this is basically saying made available to information that should be made available to individual council members.
Right, but
So it's a different.
well, it is and it isn't.
There is a relationship, yes, but
the relationship there is today, for example, from the example I just shared, information was considered private. It shouldn't have been considered private, in my opinion, not according to Rick O'Connor and not according to the ultimate decision that was made. But the point is, there's likely a ton of information that we think should be constrained. And again, it doesn't relate to personnel information or tax information, but that's information that, like, council needs to get access to this information and to go through a process of us calling staff, taking their time to get the data. Like, we don't want to burden staff to get access to this data. Ideally, the data's out there, we just go find it. And I mean, my first example of bylaw knows something we don't, the expression was used, well, if you knew what I knew, you might think differently. Well, then tell me. Like, I want to make good decisions for the township. But if I don't know things that are going to help me make better decisions for the township, then let's find a way to get it to us. That's you know, as we read through this thing here, that kind of information is clearly part of this so-called protected information, but it would help us if we had to get it in closed session to be able to make a better decision for the township. Just saying.
Seal Mariotti.
Thank you, Mayor Coutier. I think I'll talk about the last comment that Councillor Hazelton brought up about, you know, if you had all the information. There are some things that I can't tell you, but if you had all the information, you would understand, kind of thing. Well, that boils down to trust, and how much individual members of councillors trust that staff are doing their job properly, fairly, and objectively. And I don't know the ins and outs of that conversation that took place with the fire chief, because we're hearing your side of the conversation. And so it's only fair that the chief should also share his side of the conversation, but he's not here. A lot of this boils down to trust. The other fact of being open and transparent and putting all our information on the website, we can do that. That's not a problem. It would just require additional staff, because now we have to redact the various documents to make sure that there is no personal information contained in those documents. I'll give you an example. When I published my Haskets Drive report, and it included the two applications for the petition drains, two different property owners. That's all public. However, I had to redact their email address, because that is personal information. So any document that we put up on the website, someone has to go through the document to make sure that there's no personal identifiable information, and it has to be maintained. If there's a change that occurs to the document, someone has to go back in there and update it. So what I'm saying is we can do it, but it will require an additional member of staff time. The alternative is that a councillor could also, you know, follow up with staff and say, hey, how come? And that's what happened with Councillor Hazelton's example of the site plan. Something didn't make sense, and it was a unique example, and so we looked at it again, and we said, yeah, actually, yeah, there's no reason why we can't give this. It is a public document, but it goes back again to that communication flow, you know, and the trust to say, you know, Greg, why can't this site plan be uploaded? So as soon as I was made aware of it, we looked into it again and we got it fixed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I personally respect the fact that a number of times in the past, I've talked to bylaw officers, and they have in times confirmed, yes, there is an investigation taking place. And that was all they were willing to share. And I get that. Because they told me what really I wanted to know. And that was, I heard a couple complaints about property X, and they said, yes, there's an investigation taking place. They're not going to tell me the details. As much as I wanted to know the details, in some cases, they're not going to tell me. And that makes perfect sense. Unfortunately, in one sense, but that makes perfect sense. That, and I will admit to a certain amount of impatience. I see so-and-so is doing something that I think's against the rules. Yes, an investigation's taking place. Well, then why are they still doing it? Well, the investigation's taking place. When will it resolve? Well, investigation's taking place. Like, fair is fair. It's their job. And my impression with the bylaw department, like many other like all other departments in this township, they're doing a good job. And to the best of my knowledge, because I haven't seen anything otherwise, I trust the employees of this organization. And so, I think they trust me, but they're also protecting me by not telling me things I shouldn't know. Thank you. All right. What are we going to do with this? Because I fully agree with Councillor Hazelton. When possible, we should be transparent. When possible, we should make public information available with somebody seeks it. It would be wonderful to have a database available to us that had every single piece of public information on it. But I also understand from CO Mariotti that would take a fair chunk of doing, including a review, as I say, to make sure that what had to be redacted is redacted. And I also respect that some of what's in the proposed motion is against MFIPA and IPC rules, and I don't want us to pass a motion that is, I don't know if illegal is the right word, but it goes against the rules and regs. That doesn't make any sense, because we're not going to direct staff to do that. Councillor Jarvis.
Yeah, I'm sort of on the same page, Mayor, with you on this. I've had my issues over the website trying to obtain information, but ultimately, as a councillor, I think I have a responsibility to my constituents, and as a councillor to just pick up the phone, call the staff member that I need to get the information from or through, or send the email that helps me get the information I need, or gets an explanation for why I can't. And I don't see any issue, any problem with us doing exactly that. That's been a process that's been in place for a while. I think if we could improve our website so that researching certain specific items was a little easier for navigation, it'd be great. I think that's down the road, but other than that, I don't see any reason why we can't just pick up the phone and go, this is what I need. Can I have access to it, or how do I get access to it, or why am I not having access to it?
Thank you. Councillor Bochuk.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. Councillor Hazelton has been very vocal on this matter, and I don't believe we should be crafting resolutions to get a positive outcome from it all the time, because sometimes we need to look at, the motion that was brought through, and if there's modifications to be made to that motion, whoever brought that forward should be offering those, because they may want to bend or may just leave it exactly as it is. And then council has the ability to vote yes or no based on the resolution that was put forward. So I really don't think that, as much as I appreciate what the clerk does on a regular basis, for her to word it so that it is made so that council will agree to it, I'm not sure is the right way to do it. I think whoever put the motion forward should say, I want it to stay as it is, or I agree to modifications, then bring it to council.
Councilor Hazelton.
Yeah, I want to give an example of the second bullet. There was an interaction we had with one commercial entity here in the township where we wanted to, there was a request to make some information public. And the formal process was to get this commercial entity's approval to make that information public. And I'll harken back to Rick O'Connor's comment as publish it or hold the commercial interest responsible to justify why the document should not be released. In other words, your policy should be release first or release as your priority. And if there's a commercial interest that doesn't want it, produce the information. So we have that commercial entity produce the information as to why they shouldn't, that information shouldn't be released, and have them appeal to the IPC to justify why that information is not released. In other words, you're not going to release it immediately, but you're going to go through a process that rather than say, no, you can't have the information, it's, well, this commercial guy doesn't want you to have that information, so let's require that commercial entity to go to the IPC to justify why that shouldn't be released. And according to Rick O'Connor, in the example that I'm referring to, he believed very strongly that the IPC would side on the side of releasing information and not on keeping the information private. This resolution, I think, in my mind, is very contextual of what example you're thinking about. So in the example that I just related, I think that it is a subtle but important shift in our practices here, where we would, on request of information that related to a particular entity, we would start by saying not no to the asker, but we would say, pause for a moment, I have to challenge the entity to defend why that information should be made available. And if they can't provide a reasonable response, then the requester gets the information. And that's a very different process than what we have today. So when I read this resolution, that was the context of what I was considering. I've made other comments about some of these matters. So I will try not to repeat myself.
Then I'd like to go to Clerk White to respond to what you just said.
MFIPA and the IPC already has a process in place for if a request comes in for information, it's a whole third-party notice process for that person to determine and provide comments as to why they believe their information should or should not be released. And there's an appeal process if the decision of the clerk is not satisfied by either the third party or the person requesting that information. So this isn't new. This has been an ongoing process for as long as I've been a clerk.
I think I understand what you're saying, but in the example that I'm sharing here, and you and I talked about it at the time, the initial answer to the request for that information was no, as opposed to putting the commercial entity on notice that we, the township, are going to release that information unless you give us solid reasons why not. And that's a very different policy. So I would rather not hear no. I would rather hear maybe let me go through this next process of putting the onus on the commercial entity to justify why not
But
releasing it.
what it then begs the question, and I don't know, so that's why I'm asking the question, in MFIPA and IPC and all those rules and regs, the constituent comes to us and said, can you give me a copy of this report? And we, instead of saying no, we say, well, we'll check with the author of the report or the entity that provided the report. Does that entity then have to justify if they say no, or they can just simply say no?
Well, currently, the example we went through was the entity said no, and so it was end of story. But the coaching that we got.
Okay, but to me, we could have a long, this is, we require, I'll call it a legal assessment as to, unless the rules are very clear from MFIPA, if the author of that report says, no, I don't want it released, do they have to give a list of explanations? And then do we have to decide whether or not we accept them? Like, I'm concerned that if we take the approach of we're going to release it, unless they come up with reasons that are satisfactory to us, we're just going to expose ourselves. Because if we say, oh, I don't think your reasons are adequate, here's the report, and then they sue us for releasing information they didn't want released, we're going to create a minefield.
I hear what you're saying, and I will respectfully suggest that we perhaps revisit this with Rick O'Connor, because his guidance was very clear, both in general and specifically on this matter. And the general positioning of it is we, I think, as a township, need to have an open bias as opposed to a closed bias. And what my experience was in that previous example was a closed bias. In other words, we think no is the answer, and until you, as the asker, prove that or justify why and override the no.
What I'm smiling at, with apologies, I can't help it. Number 12 on this list is protecting township from potential liabilities. And to me, what you're saying is we should take the approach of let's risk the liability and release it, because because Rick O'Connor suggested that that's the attitude we should take: release all and risk somebody suing us. Well, that goes totally against protecting the township from potential liabilities.
On the surface, it sounds like that, but Rick's coaching was the open bias is the preferred strategy, and the risk of concern, liability in these kinds of circumstances is negligible. And so again,
I'm sorry, I'm just smiling because if I'm not sure of the particular situation you're referring to, but I think I know it. And if you think the risk of not being charged is low in that case, I think you're mistaken. Okay. Councillor Cooper.
I'm not going to sort of get involved in that particular piece other than to say two things. I wanted to start with, it was suggested by Councillor Bochek that the drafter of this, which were more than one council member, should redraft it to the language or keep it. And I just want to talk about the process we've been going through with the whole process improvement meetings, is to have input from council, not to just say this is the way it should be written. We're sitting here having discussions and trying to tailor this to what council really wishes, not just an individual councillor. So I wanted to comment on that, because I'm not saying it has to be this way. I'm trying to induce discussion, and I think that's what we're doing. And if we can't come up with a resolution that we can agree to, then maybe we move on. But that was number one, and number two is I think from my perspective, I just want to encourage as much transparency as possible. And that's at 10,000 feet, whether it's to the public or to council members or whomever, wherever we can be transparent. And maybe that's what this resolution needs to be. Wherever we can be transparent, let's be transparent. And if we have to re-clarify what we're allowed to do or not allowed to do, we can do that in due course. But I'm encouraging that we make it sure that it's out there. The other point on the new website and getting information in there, I don't agree that we need to hire somebody. I think we need to change our practices in terms of when we do input new information. So if we have a brand new application, keep transparency in the back of our mind that we're going to put in as much as we possibly can, not redo the work, do it when we have to do it and do it in a transparent fashion wherever possible. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Hazelton, that committee of the whole encourage council to encourage transparency wherever possible. Encourage. How are we wording these fancy things from committee of the whole to council? Yeah. Encourage that anyway. The council encourage the township to be as open and transparent as possible. Councillor Bocha. Councillor Bochek has asked for the air conditioning to be turned down, even though his mic wasn't on. Yeah.
Sorry. May I confirm, be it resolved that committee of the whole encourage the Township of Georgian Bay to be as open and transparent as possible?
Yeah. Well, we're just encouraging it to continue in that direction. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. My mic wasn't on. I apologize to everybody. To repeat myself, I'm looking at item 12, which is protecting the township for potential liabilities. And basically, it is encouraging the establishment of a working group of experts to help us reduce our exposure.
Right.
Yeah.
So this resolution is really there to remind ourselves that we've been incurring huge expenses from a legal perspective over the last 5-10 years. And so if we can put together a group of advisors to help us deal with maybe, and some of it may be actually looking at some of the areas where we've had high expenses and say, how could we have avoided this? That's the kind of exposure that I'm trying to get at in this particular potential liabilities. It's not just what we're going to see in the future, but let's learn from the past, and that's what history's good for. And we have examples of where we've had massive legal expenses, and it turns out, had we had better advice on certain things, we wouldn't have had the problem that we have. So that's I just wanted to give a background as to why I think this is an important issue. We are charged with being responsible for the finances of and the spending that comes in, or sorry, the support that comes in from our constituents, high taxes and relatively modest services and huge legal expenses. I think we need to try and figure out a way to reduce that. So that's the purpose of this. Thank you.
Director Engel.
I think as has been discussed in the previously, we have engaged, we have a risk management consultant as part of our insurer. And we have engaged that consultant and done site walks of all of our parks and facilities. In the last couple of weeks, we have capital requests coming forward to speak to part of that. And that is in those specific areas. I am on the working group for the minimum maintenance standards and have a very strong understanding when it comes to roads and our risk in those areas. But you are correct that we are open in some areas, and we are working to address that in those specific areas. That said, they're very diverse areas within the municipality that a single working group would not necessarily be effective in addressing each of these. So I think it's more of what areas are you concerned with in a working group specific to that. So in other words, what I'm working with our risk management from our insurer is not necessarily going to speak to something on the planning side of things or the fire or those areas. So it is good to be aware, but we are already actively working to address some of those risks.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because that's risk management in the, I'll call it the typical interpretation of risk management of getting sued. But I think Councillor Cooper is also speaking to the fact that a lot of our, when he refers to our high legal expenses, a lot of that is to do with things like OLT reviews, appeals, and that sort of stuff, which is wouldn't have been covered by insurance anyway. So to me, that we got two categories of risk here. One is I'll call it where we get sued and insurance may step in, and I absolutely appreciate working with their risk management expertise to reduce those exposures, because ultimately it should reduce our premiums. I know that maybe I'm naive when I say that, but that's what it should do. Reducing our exposure, but the other exposure we have is not covered by insurance, and that is when we have residents who choose for one reason or another to take us to the OLT or similar to review our decisions, and that's I think a very different category of exposure, but one that hits our taxpayers on an annual basis.
And I appreciate the initiative that has been taken so far with our insurer, and that certainly will be beneficial to us and to our insurer. But as you point out, Mr. Mayor, there are other exposures for sure, and including in planning, and that I think need to be considered, but other areas are across our township that we inadvertently may put ourselves at risk, and I think we do have some talent available to us that in a working group could maybe put a highlight on how we could avoid certain expenses in the future. So that's and the legal ones are massive. So I think we need another look at it in a different way.
Councillor Bochek.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor. I think it's a responsibility of council, actually, because most of the OLT cases that cost us a fortune in lawyers are because council did not trust the work that one of our departments did with all their resources, legal, non-legal, whatever they use, and bring a report forward, and then council disagrees with it. And then we end up in the OLT. I put faith in our senior staff members that bring something well-educated, well-researched to the council table. If council decides not to agree with that opinion, we end up in the OLT, and it costs us a fortune. So I think a lot of our expenses, legal expenses, are perhaps we're not listening or understanding what our staff is telling us after they've got legal opinions, they've researched it, and they bring it to council and we turn it down. That's where the real cost that I see occurring. So that's my points. I think as a council, we need to listen to our professionals that have done the work, and we don't agree with them, so we end up in the OLT. Thank you.
Council Jarvis.
Yeah, just to follow up to that, I think that we're entitled as council to disagree with the professional staff, provide the way of recommendations, especially when it comes to planning. And we've had large discussions about that, but I think there's a lessons learned process we already have in place, care of item 1 on this agenda that Councillor Cooper has provided to us. So I think that lessons learned and debrief process helps us in that area right off the bat. So I'm struggling to understand what other legal, other costs we may be incurring other than through planning or through our operations department and their insurance people who can provide us with information. Whenever we challenge a report from the planning department and then know that we have to go to OLT, there's always that acknowledgement from the planning department that there could be costs involved if we oppose a recommendation, and then our lawyers are very good at letting us know the cost implications of following up with the OLT. So I don't see where we're going anywhere with this. I think we've already covered the ground through other recommendations in this whole process we've had here before us. So I think we're covered.
Yeah, I mean, and I think further to your comment, Councillor Jarvis, I think because we know that the potential liability is in 2 quite different categories. Establishing a working group to cover both those categories would be establishing a working group that's going to be have half its members board half the time, simply because they're experts in risk management as understood by insurance company, whereas others are more the planners, the planner expertise who say, well, maybe we should make changes to the official plan, or maybe we make changes to how our planning department reports, or maybe we should make different changes to our councilors next election to reduce, it's a whole different, there's in my mind, 2 very different realms to this. And I think both realms are already being considered. You may.
Just briefly, it may appear that there's duplication. I'm not convinced that there is, and I heard things like, we turn things down at council and therefore it's our fault. We don't have necessarily the expertise on council to deal with some of these things, especially as it pertains to, potential liabilities and risk management. We're not risk management experts. And I'm delighted, as I said, that we have some assistance with respect to our operations area and the insurer and so forth, but there's the non-insured areas that are part of it. And I also say to us that we do have expertise that I'm aware of in our township that is not being asked to assist us at the moment. And why wouldn't we want to use that? That's my suggestion. And with the legal expenses as to where they are, I'm not sure that number 1 necessarily covers that off. I'm sort of zeroing in on that in particular in this cost area. So there you go. Thank you.
I'm not quite sure what to do with this. I mean, because like I say, in my mind, there's 2 different realms. The one realm I believe is being taken care of. The other realm, I guess what I would like to see is if we're going to establish a working group, or aren't working groups supposed to be established by staff? not council, but anyway, the minor detail there. But if we're going to establish a working group, I'd like to see something more specific as to what the assignment is. And
Reducing the legal expense.
okay, so then the first step there would be an updated analysis of our legal expenses to give us the broad categories of where they're being incurred. And so to me, that might be the because we do get those on an annual basis. The legal expense review, I believe.
I believe it's annually. I see Jazz nodding her head.
So I'm thinking that probably the first step in this would be to review the most recent, or maybe there's one coming out relatively soon. I apologize because I can't remember the last time when I saw one, and I know I've seen them at some point. But
through you, Mayor Coutier. So are we talking about the cost of our legal expenses?
Yeah.
So the Q2 report was put on the agenda, was on the consent agenda, and we are currently over budget, and we will be coming out with a Q3 report likely in October or November as part of the budget process.
I mean, and maybe that should be the starting point of further conversation on this, is saying, okay, how much of our legal expense is planning versus human resources versus operations versus, because
How much is covered by our insurer?
Yeah, yeah.
How much is it?
Yes, please.
Again, I'm going to revert back to council and the decision that council makes. When we go into closed session and we contact a lawyer and the lawyer gets all the information, the lawyer is in business to make money. And he doesn't say in our closed session, yeah, no, you don't stand a chance. They say, oh yeah, you stand a chance because
no, we've had opinions where they've said we don't recommend going down route A or B. We recommend C or D,
right,
because of the cost. They do that.
Yes, but once again, we're talking about losing at the OLT. We're talking about the expenses that we have with the OLT in lawyers' costs. And I just see every time a decision is taken into closed session, the lawyer says, yes, I can fight this. And yes, it costs us money. So I bring it back to council again, that we're making decisions that that we have to hire a lawyer to go represent our decisions. And the lawyer's never going to say no. There's always a yes in there somewhere so that they can make money off of this. So it's back to council that maybe we shouldn't be taking that course of action every time.
Risk management.
Okay, so may I make a suggestion on this one, is that we set it aside for now when we get the updated legal expense, and maybe you could include with that a couple of years history. Then we can at the council discuss whether or not this the horror of the dollar amounts inspires us to establish a committee or working group or something to look a little further into it. Okay, I'm trying to get past this particular item on this list because I think.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, Matt. Because I just want to caution you though of bringing in a group of experts, but who are not actively employed by the township on dealing with legal files.
Well, and part of the issue we're going to have there is
that's not that
confidentiality,
right,
in some of those matters.
So what I propose we do is that when the next quarterly report comes out, is that we have we can have a closed session meeting to break down those legal issues, because I'm sure everyone on council is aware of one legal issue that has far outweighed all the others combined.
Let's do that. Now, couple of things here is, one, I want this whole thing to be done today by noon. We only have one item left, and I have a quick comment to make on item 5, which is gaining a better understanding of the roles we play. And Be it resolved that council create a list of key roles and goals to assist staff in understanding council's roles and objectives.
Just point of order.
Yes, certainly.
Do we need to document what we're going to do with 12 before we leave it?
Actually, that might be wise.
Thank you.
So, do we put forward a motion saying that, in response to item 12, be it moved by Councillor Cooper, second by Councillor Hazelton, that council meet with staff in closed session following the upcoming legal cost review? Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that, Councillor Hazelton, your suggestion. I think that's going to make this neater. So, moved by the Cooper and Hazelton, be it moved that council meet in closed session to discuss the legal files billing summary, legal expense report, thank you. The upcoming legal expense report for review. Okay. All those in favor? Okay, and that is carried. And the comment I wanted to make about understanding the roles we play, we're resolved to list key roles and goals to assist staff in understanding council's roles and objectives, as well as the individual roles that each member plays. Well, first of all, I think we have to be a little clear. One, we have had training a number of occasions this term, and certainly in prior terms, about the roles and responsibilities of council and of staff. We've also had, we have staff work plans. So that, to me, that includes the staff's objectives. We also had goal setting for each term of council, and that we had individual sit downs on all that. I'm just wondering, what are we achieving with item 5 that hasn't already been done? Councillor Hazelton.
Just before we dig into this, you just said something about goal setting, and presumably you and the CAO took notes on the goals that each of us discussed. Would it not be useful for that information to be published even in private for council, so that we know what each of us are setting as our goals and priorities? That would be helpful, I think, to each of us as we go about dealing with our goals and priorities. But so that's a question. Can we do that? Do we need to have a resolution to do that, or is there any reason why we can't do that? Open and transparent kind of thing.
Well, in one sense, I would argue that's up to each councillor, because I'll say I'm not sure of the right terminology, but I consider them private discussions, and that no individual councillor gave me authority to publish publicly our discussions.
Understood. Maybe we can poll the individual councillors to do that. And I think, given that there's a desire to be open and transparent, I would hope that each councillor is prepared to be open and transparent about their goals and things that they wish to achieve for the balance of the term. And anyways, that's an aside. It would be useful if the clerk could just poll each councillor to see if that was something that the councillor was prepared to release, and then toss it out there. But coming back to specifically item 5, one phrase that I think was used prior to this resolution being crafted, and no, I didn't craft it, but I think I understand some of where it's come from. I think it would be useful for us to understand from staff's perspective who they see as their internal and external customers. And that's explicitly written in here. So one of the things that we have heard countless times from Councillor Cooper over the last 7 years is certainly from a council standpoint, our customers are the residents. And if staff don't think that the residents are their customers, that's okay. We'd like to understand what they are. And when this is written as council would, as a means to get a better understanding and appreciation for staff roles, I think that clarity would be helpful. So it's not intended to be a make work effort. It's intended to be a clear understanding, and maybe all of this currently exists and it's already out there and there's no work required. Quite frankly, I don't know where I would go to look for it, but I think that's kind of where we are going. And, you know, perhaps we as individual councillors need to be clear on who we think our customer is and prioritize that as well.
I'm willing to be very clear. My employer are the residents of this township. Councilor Cooper.
I want to just, on the sort of understanding who the internal and external customers are, I think, I don't know if any of you have, in a sort of corporate world, been through a customer service training program, but I have more than once and with different organizations, because the organizations felt that understanding where the priorities were is critical, not just for the board of directors, the chairman of the board, for the senior management, for the staff in the organization. Are we aligned, or maybe we don't have the same, think we have the same customers? And I think one of the objectives I have is making sure that we are singing from the same hymn book. And that's the purpose of this resolution, is to see if we can, through a relatively simple process of customer service identification and training, find out what all of us think. And I don't think there's, in my view, there's not just one customer. If you ask people, well, who's your first customer, who's your second customer, the categories I'm talking about now. So it would be constituents, it might be specific types of constituents, who knows, a specific member of the council, let's say, which is sort of like the board of directors, are they a customer or not, and so forth. And that's why I put this out. It was basically to help us gain a better understanding of how all of us think, not just the council, but staff as well. It's a basic program that could be bring some unification and unify us in terms of who we see as number one. And if we happen to think that it's somebody from Severn Township, I think we've got a problem. As an example, silly example, but it still is an example.
All right, so we're now talking about identifying our customers and customer service.
That's where I'm.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councilor Bocek, followed by Councilor Jarvis.
So my thoughts on this is, I don't need anybody to tell me how to do my job. I've been through the training. I know what my responsibilities are as a councillor, and my role as a councillor is to serve my constituents, period. Whether right or wrong, whether I believe they're right or wrong, I represent their point of view both at the local level and at the district level. I don't work for the township of Georgian Bay. I never have. I work for my constituents. And that is my only role as a councillor. I don't need any more training on that. I don't need anybody to tell me what my responsibilities are. I know what they are, and that's to work for my constituents, period.
Council Jarvis.
Thank you. I have issue when we keep considering ourselves as customer oriented and implying that we're some sort of retail organization. I see our number one customer is the environment. And that's the top priority with a lot of things we do. That's puts constituents down a slight level. I don't like to think of my constituents as customers, except when they call in here and are looking for service to any inquiry they have, and getting prompt response to whatever request they have, whether it's a response they want or a response they don't want. But in my mind, our number one customer is the environment. That's all we talk about. That's number one priority in everything we do. It's the environment. So let's stick with that one. If we can't agree on that, then we got some trouble at hand that we've got to sort out.
Well, I mean, that's when I say the residents of this township are my employer, they're the ones who pay the bill. And I think, and I'm going to take what Councillor Bocek said and take it a step further. I believe I have been hired to exercise my knowledge, experience, judgment, whatever you want to call it, to do what I believe is the best for our area long term. Absolutely, on that list is the environment. On that list are the yet unborn of future generations that I want to be able to enjoy this township the way past generations have, whether it be a place of work or of pleasure. And so, yeah, no, to me, I don't believe I was hired simply to survey my neighbors and vote whatever they tell me to vote. I found it very interesting in a correspondence that was received a while ago, and it more or less said, well, the majority of voices are saying this, so therefore you have to say that. And I'm thinking, no, I have to listen. But if I don't think that's the best for our township long term, then I may not vote with the majority of voices that say that. Because I also recognize that when we hear a lot of voices, they are a fraction of the people in our township. And I believe I serve all, not just the loudest voices of the day. But anyway, Ms. Schneier.
Thank you, Your Worship. The language of external customers isn't new to our communications plan. We have been using that type of language for a number of years. And we are coming back in October with our updated communication plan for your review. You'll see there, Councillor Jarvis, that the environment, of course, is very highly implemented into our discussion, as well as future branding initiatives. But just to rest assured, sometimes the perception that we are not aware of this type of external customers might not be something that we use internally here, but we do, and you'll be delighted to see the next report in October.
Oh, good. Something to look forward to. Councillor Cooper.
Very good, an interesting discussion, and we've already demonstrated that some of us have different priorities. And that's part of the learning process, and there is an opportunity to learn here. And that's why I suggested that we have and go through a simple customer service training program. You can call them constituents, customers, you could call them priorities, but clearly we've got, even with what has been said here already, some different priorities, and I think we need to understand each other, and that's what would be why we would benefit from having something like this. Thank you.
Something like a customer services training session? Or okay. So be it moved by Councillor Cooper, seconded by Councillor Hazelton, that Council recommend a customer service training session. for council and senior management team?
Yeah.
Councilor Hazelton.
I'm not sure that that really gets at all of this.
Well, you started this customer, you emphasized that line.
I understand that. And customer service training, I think, is, I mean, given where the world of customer service is going these days, certainly would be helpful. But I think this number 5 was trying to gain a better understanding. So as Councillor Cooper just said, there are, 5 of us up here? And it seemed like all 5 of us had slightly different views of what our priorities were. Sometimes they can be simplified initially. I would suggest that from what I've seen in the township, even different departments of the township have different perceptions of what their focus is, their customers are. And I think what this was intended to do, and I'm not discounting the need and value of an orientation of customer service, but I think what this was intended to do was to help communicate departmentally where the various departments see and prioritize their customers, so that we get a better understanding of what's going through their minds when they do their job. And so from a staff standpoint, that would be hugely valuable. And I think staff would like to hear where we see value. And yes, you could say, a very quick, summary point, hey, the residents are our customers. Well, maybe we heard also maybe the environment is our customer, or maybe there's some other subtleties in there. I would like to think that to some degree, the township and the staff of the township are my customer, in the sense that when I'm dealing with a resident issue, if I feel that the township is presenting the right position to deal with the matter, I feel that I need to own that as if I'm a part of the township and defend staff's opinions on those matters, so that the resident can see harmony amongst not only council but also staff. So I wouldn't want someone to think that I only think that a resident is a customer. I'm part of an organization, although I'm not an employee, but I'm part of an organization and I feel an obligation to defend staff wherever I can. And I think that's important for me.
And I think staff greatly appreciate that.
And I think that staff need to hear that from me. And I think that the onus of us sharing that and perhaps going through a little internal thought process to begin to share that, I think has value. It has value in both ways.
I'm going to propose expanding my draft motion. Moved by Councillor Cooper, and Councillor Hayden. Be it resolved the council, be it resolved the council, be it resolved the committee of the whole recommend a customer identification and customer service training session. Councillor Bochek.
I take offense to what Councillor Hazelton said, that there's 5 different opinions up here at this council table. I think that's the root of democracy. You have to have difference in opinions. You can't all be trained to think the same way.
I don't think he was implying that.
I'll quote him, and you can go back and watch it, is, how many are at the table? 5. Well, that's 5 different opinions. And that's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 5 different opinions. Not everybody be aligned by going and learning, our responsibilities of all doing the same thing. And I think that was the impetus of what Councillor Hazelton was saying. And I don't believe in that whatsoever.
Absolutely not. There was no intention for me to say we all have to say the same thing or do the same thing. But I think what is important for staff to hear is what are these individual opinions from councillors? And we are going to think and act differently, and it would be helpful for them to know where we're coming from, just like it would be helpful for us to know where they're coming from.
Well, that makes a little more sense, but I will reiterate that this staff is not my customer. The constituents are my customer, period,
And
bar none.
yeah,
And the environment is a very important part of my decision making, but they're not a customer either. It's a consideration that I always have forefront in my head when talking to my constituents.
Councillor Jarvis.
It brings to mind a comment I've heard time and again. I like repeating it, and it goes as follows. Everybody's entitled to my opinion.
Well, then what is your opinion? So then we can get this all done with. Okay, I'm going to do this one more time. I got moved by Councillor Cooper, sent by Councillor Hazelton. And it was, be it resolved, the Committee of the Whole recommend a customer identification and customer service training program for council and senior management team. All those in favor? Well, we got enough votes anyway, Councillor Bochek. You don't have. No, we only do that if it's a recorded vote.
I noticed that one of the items marked down as disagreeing with the town with the resolution. See that plainly. So if there's not a recorded vote, I would all. Then I really.
For Claire, do we record votes in Cal?
Chart with all our names down the left side, and who agreed, disagreed, and everybody agreed on one and I disagreed.
One of them previously did have a recorded vote, but it's specific to each individual motion on who has and who has not requested a recorded vote. So as a standard, we do not do recorded votes unless one is requested. And I believe, yeah, one of them from July, there was a recorded vote requested, but that was one specific motion. So if you would like recorded vote, one can be requested, but as a whole, we are not doing recorded votes.
This was about 10 charts there, and I'll have nothing on except for one.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
You know, all
That's
the
the
other ones
recorded-
just had to carry
Yeah.
ticked.
Okay.
Yeah.
I better understand. But I would like.
Okay.
If I can't get a recorded vote on this because we've already voted on it, that's fine.
I have no objection to the vote being recorded, even though I already took it.
Okay, I
A recorded
appreciate that.
vote can be requested even right after the vote was taken.
Okay, well,
Okay.
there you go.
Great, thank you.
So,
The seconder as a mover, I'm in favor.
okay, all right. So if we know the Clerk Way, would you be so kind as to take a recorded vote on this matter?
I would love to.
Ah, I appreciate that.
Councillor,
See, I can already tell you how people voted, but let's.
let the record show Councillor Bochek has requested a recorded vote. Councillor Bochek, how do you vote? Councillor Cooper, how do you vote?
Happily, yes.
Councillor Hazelton, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Jarvis, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Kutsier, how do you vote?
Yes.
Let the record show the motion's carried 4-1.
All right, thank you very much. Okay. Moved by Councillor Jarvis, second by Councillor Bochek. Be it resolved, the committee of the whole does now adjourn at 11:50 a.m. to be reconvened on October 7th, 2025 at the call of the chair. Councillor Jarvis, were you asking for a recorded vote? I don't know if we can do that in one of these. Oh, can we?
Get one of those a
Okay,
month.
all those in favor? Let the record show that I saw 5 hands, including my own. All right, thank you very much.